Imagine an 8-year-old girl, all alone on the street, hugging her last piece of stale bread as the rain punishes the city. Her name is Isabela. She tries to shield herself under the awning of a storefront, freezing and hungry, when suddenly she notices a purebred dog, drenched, bleeding, and limping through the storm. Without hesitation, Isabela tears her bread, the only food she has for the day, and offers it to the animal, pulling him tight against her chest to keep him warm, though she herself is shaking from fear and fever. She has no idea this lost dog is actually the beloved pet of Alexander, a millionaire known for his cold heart, who has already lost everything he ever loved to betrayal. The next morning, Alexander finds Isabela tenderly caring for his dog, but scarred by the past. All he can do is accuse her of theft. Yet, why does this little girl get under his skin so much? Will Alexander ignore her act of kindness? Or will he realize the miracle he's searched for might be right in front of his eyes? Stick with me and watch to the end, because what happens in the hospital is going to change this story forever. People rush past, shielding themselves from the rain with bags and newspapers. No one looks to the sides or beneath the pharmacy awning where Isabela huddles, trying to escape the biting wind. Her old coat covers just half her legs, heavy and damp. A chunk of hardened bread rests in her hand, steeped in the sour, grimy smell of days spent living on the street. On the other side of the sidewalk, water rushes down the gutter, carrying away discarded wrappers, dead leaves, and dust dissolved into mud. Horns blare, engines rumble, the city's pulse. Isabela pretends not to hear. Her stomach protests once again, and what she feels isn't just hunger, but a long-standing sense of yearning. She closes her eyes, trying to recall her mother's embrace. It's hard to picture the face. The memory slips away as quickly as the rain along the curb. In her coat pocket, she keeps a single treasure, a beaded necklace she and her mother made when home still existed. She grips it tight in her small, cold palm, holding on to the memories so they don't disappear forever. Night falls, and the silence deepens as the shopkeepers lock up. Few people remain, each more hurried and indifferent than the last. Isabela leans her head against the wall, watching the lamplight glow yellow in the puddles. She imagines that, in another life, people might offer her a slice of warm cake, a smile, a kind word. Here, old bread must do for comfort and hope. She sighs, hugging her knees, trying to take up less space in the world. Weariness outweighs even the cold. Not sure who or what to believe in, Isabela closes her eyes and makes herself a promise. Tomorrow will be different. Tomorrow she'll try again. For tonight, surviving is enough. The tapping of rain on the asphalt sounds like a drum in Isabela's ears. She pulls her grimy coat tighter, but it's no use. The cold and damp have long since seeped in. Huddled beneath the closed bakery awning, her stomach aches from hunger and the stale bread in her pocket. It's hard to tell what hurts more, the empty belly or the silence of hurried strangers who swerve around her without ever meeting her eyes. Amid all this noise, Isabela hears a faint whimper. At first, she thinks it's just the wind, but then she hears it again, a soft whine, almost asking permission among the honking and raindrops. She searches until she finds, in the darkest corner of the sidewalk behind a torn garbage bag, a dog. It's hard to tell what breed. The fur, once white, is now gray with mud. Its back leg looks injured, and it trembles all over, sobbing, eyes wide with fear. Isabela looks around. Will anyone help? No one stops. No one sees. Everyone has places to go, umbrellas, a warm home to return to. She thinks about the hard bread in her pocket. She'd saved it for later, but she approaches slowly, extends her hand, and says softly, "Come here, little one." The dog growls, afraid, but the girl's voice is gentle. She tosses him a bit of bread on the ground. The dog sniffs, limps forward, and carefully picks it up. He eats with such hunger that Isabela can't help but smile. She inches closer, slow, and careful not to scare him. When the dog allows a touch, Isabela feels the wet fur beneath her cold hand and, for a moment, forgets the chill of the streets. The dog is still trembling, but he rests his nose on her knees and closes his eyes. No one notices. Cars pass. The rain falls even harder. The world carries on indifferent. Isabela gently hugs the dog. She knows she's not leaving. There, beneath the rain, two lives nearly swallowed by time find each other. And for the first time all day, Isabela doesn't feel alone. Isabela doesn't think. She just acts. The bread in her hand is hard, cold, almost a rock, but the presence of the huddled dog under the awning is more important. The fur matted with rain and filth. Without hesitating, she squats down slowly, her knees burning atop the wet pavement. That sour smell of days-old bread rises up as she breaks it with effort, but she doesn't care. She brings her hand close to the dog's nose, arms stretched, every muscle tense with fear and the urge to help. "Here, friend," she whispers, her voice almost lost in the sound of the rain. The dog, scared, peeks with one eye, then two. He sniffs the air, wary. Only when she withdraws her hand a bit does he finally dare to snatch the piece. He chews slowly, as if he can't believe his luck. Isabela smiles, small and discreet. Though her stomach screams, she breaks off another piece and offers it. The dog doesn't leap for it, and it's only then Isabela realizes he doesn't yet know if he should trust her. She approaches with care, her hand open, palm up. "I promise it's all yours." The dog, shy, licks her fingers. A tiny gesture, but it warms her in a strange, good way, as if the rest of the city ceases to exist. She gives him the last of the bread, a tangled mess of joy and hunger. Minutes pass. The cold worsens, but she settles in next to the dog, pulling her torn coat and sharing what little shelter she can. The dog curls in closer, trembling less than before. Isabela runs her hand gently over his filthy fur and feels the animal begin to relax, eyes fluttering closed. There, between the pouring rain and the city's bustling noise, she forgets herself. She thinks only of that dog and that tiny hope. Their hunger both slightly eased, their fear paused for just a while, their slender, tenacious love. Together, they wait for tomorrow with more bread, less cold, side by side beneath the same awning. That night, it felt as though the cold came from inside, not just the wind. Isabela curled up tighter and tried to shield the dog with her own thin coat. He shook so badly he seemed to be sobbing, eyes closed in resignation, his skinny body pressed against her legs. Rain pounded the pavement, and the few passers-by barely glanced their way. Just two more ghosts clinging to the city wall. Isabela tucked the coat around the dog, putting on the sweetest smile she could to calm him. "It's okay, little one," she whispered. He opened one eye, trusting, and rested his head on her knee. Isabela's chest ached with cold and hunger, but the heavier pain was fear. Fear the dog would get worse. Fear the rain would get heavier. Fear tomorrow might never come. She remembered when she used to sleep at home, safe, under blankets, and her mom's gentle hand. Now she was the one who had to protect someone else. All she had was this dog, a friend brought by chance. More than company, he was a silent promise that no one there would ever be truly alone. The hours of the night crept by, bringing the murmur of wet leaves, the distant sound of cars, the old familiar shapes of fear. The dog took a deep breath and whimpered softly as a thunderclap echoed. Isabela clutched the trembling animal tighter. They stayed like that, two shipwrecked souls waiting for the storm to pass. When dawn began to break, there was no energy left for hope, only the quiet, determined resolve to maintain the shared warmth. She knew that on that wet pavement, protecting the dog meant protecting herself from being forgotten. She planted a shy kiss between his ears and took a deep breath. For now, they were enough for each other. Inside that huge house, everything was swallowed up by a strange silence. Alexander Ramirez paced from one end of the living room to the other, always circling back to the same spot, his bare feet cold on the marble floor. The low lights didn't help, only made the shadows grow. Beyond the glass, the rain rattled, each drop leaping as if it wanted to burst in and bring even more anxiety to those solitude-filled walls. It was night. The digital clock glowed 3 o'clock, red numbers slicing through the dark. But no one slept there. He sank into the armchair, a forgotten glass in hand, breathing slow, just to keep from feeling the ache inside his gut. On the table, a pile of scattered photos of the dog. In most of them, the dog lay on the office rug, looking up at him the way only a dog ever really does. Alexander traced the outline of the nose in the photos, recalling days when trust came more easily. In all that silence, he could hear even his thoughts, and they weren't kind. The only friend he'd managed to keep, after so many had walked all over him, was that dog. For an instant, he closed his eyes and pressed his forehead to the cold table. He tasted the bitter sting of regret. How had he let a defenseless animal slip out alone in the rain? The anger at himself itched to be unleashed. He wanted to punch the wall, but his hand felt like it weighed a ton. In truth, it wasn't just about the dog. It was all the times he'd lost everything, when trusting became a reason for shame. Every betrayal, every lie, every false friend had taken a piece of him away. Now, he was alone again. The help didn't come at night anymore. This place was a mausoleum, Alexander thought. Wealth made no difference now. It just made the emptiness colder. The wind rattled the window. The dog must be out in the street, wet, frightened, maybe hurt. Each possibility brought a different pain. Guilt gripped his throat in a knot he couldn't even grumble past. Suddenly, he stood up, his face red with anger and no one to see. In the mirror, he saw a tired man, beard unshaven, hard eyes gone dull. He grabbed his dark coat, threw his keys in his pocket. He didn't care about the pajamas or old slippers. He just wanted out, maybe to recover some lost piece of himself. The garage door was heavy. The sound of traffic out on the street felt distant. Sitting in the car, he started the engine, but just sat there, the sound of the wipers against the windshield slicing through the calm of the night. Alexander took a deep breath, glanced at the glove compartment. Inside, there was only an old, slobbery, half-chewed dog toy. That was all he really had, a dirty toy. Just then, image, business, contract didn't matter anymore. All he wanted was to see that wet nose again, to feel the dog leap onto his lap. The animal had never asked anything of him, except attention. The city seemed different in the rain. In the wealthier neighborhoods, the lights glowed warm, but they felt empty. Hardly anyone on the streets. Alexander drove slowly, eyes glued to every corner, thinking maybe he'd find the dog there, alone. The wipers droned on, but he didn't care. He pressed his face to the window, searching every shadow. His mind tangled memories with anxiety. He'd think of his own daughter, a lost life, his wife's shouting on the phone, the news of the fire. Nothing made sense. Every time he thought he saw a moving shadow, his heart raced. It wasn't the dog. It was always just a garbage bag, someone sleeping curled up by the wall, a child wrapped in a dirty blanket. Alexander's eyes slid away from those sights, but he couldn't ignore them. It only added to his guilt. For an hour, maybe two, he circled the streets. He'd stop, get out, call the dog's name, silently hoping to hear a bark. Sometimes, he'd look up at the dark sky and let the rain fall on his face till his bones ached. Cold fingers, a clutching heart, and anger turning into pure sorrow. He returned to the car and let his head fall against the steering wheel. He cried, a little, not like a child, but the kind of tears you try to swallow. His face, wet with rain or tears, he tried hard not to know the difference. He was never good at hugs, never knew how to be comfort for anyone. Now, all he wanted was to hold that dog again, even dirty and soaked, on his lap. But the fear was bigger, fear of losing something else he loves. Another story ending in abandonment. When dawn began to break, the anger faded, replaced by something else. Determination. Deep down, Alexander knew it wasn't just about the dog. He was the last part of himself that still knew how to be loved in return. And in that rain, amid alleyway shadows and doorways, he decided he wasn't going to lose that again. That morning felt like an extra punishment for Isabela. The bench in the city square was still wet from last night's storm, and she hugged the dog tightly, trying to hold on to any warmth she could find. The dog shivered, not from fear but from cold. She gently stroked his stained fur and felt with her fingers the open wound on his leg. It was hard to accept that this square had been their only home for weeks. The sky threatened rain again when a shout broke the silence. "Let go of my dog." A man strode over, expensive jacket splattered with mud, leather shoes sinking in the grass. His eyes, hard, almost furious, darted from the dog to Isabela. By instinct, Isabela clutched the animal closer, as if that could hide him from the world. Suddenly, it felt like the empty square was crowded with watchful eyes. The coffee cart vendor, an old woman reading on a nearby bench, a boy with a backpack. Even the pigeons disappeared. "Theft is a crime," the man thundered. "I saw my dog with this brat. Somebody call the police." Isabela felt her chest tighten. The dog tried to curl up more, whimpering softly. She wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't move. She wanted to explain. "Sir, I found him lying in the gutter alone and bleeding last night. I gave him some bread, wrapped him in my shirt. The coffee lady saw me." But no words came out. Just trapped tears, the smell of dirty dog, old shame, and the ache of never once being trusted, of always being looked at like she's hiding something. The man lunged to yank the dog from her lap. The dog barked, squirming. Isabela hugged him tighter. At that moment, the coffee vendor came over. "She took good care of him, sir. The poor little thing almost died last night." The man hesitated. He looked at the dog and saw the filthy rag tied around its leg. For a brief moment, he almost apologized, but his scowl quickly returned. "That doesn't mean a thing. You're not his owner. Who do you think you are?" Isabela dropped her head. The dog's eyes were all affection and fear. And right then, surrounded by coldness and doubt, a single caress was enough for the girl to feel, if only faintly, a bit of courage. Silence. Just the sound of rain starting again, soft, as if even the weather couldn't decide whose dog he really was. In the beginning, nobody spoke up, but in the square, morning silence is different, sliced by whispering. Elderly men sat on benches near Isabela, arms crossed, eyes wary. A mother rushed by, pulling her child's hand, glancing at Isabela like she was a threat. Those looks weighed heavier than the cold. Alexandre stood, tense, joue clenched. He looked at Isabela and the dog, at the crumbs of bread on the ground. His hands, hidden deep in the pockets of his expensive coat, trembled slightly. On the surface, he feigned anger and authority, but his eyes flickered. Torn between wanting to protect the girl and a cultivated certainty that trust was a mistake, Alexander hesitated. Isabela shrank further into herself, almost lost inside her thin coat. The dog, skinny and filthy, pressed tightly against her, eyes closed, more secure right now than she was. She dared to look up and saw only judgment around her. The smells of wet ground and cardboard lingered from the rain. She trembled, not just from cold, but from that old, familiar shame and fear. Deep down, she just wanted to apologize, but didn't know for what. Across the square, someone muttered, "That kid's just asking for trouble." Alexandre Verred. He took a deep breath and looked away. Right in the middle of his face, discomfort bloomed, shame to find himself among the judges, but no courage to rebel. A security guard started to approach. Alexander, gathering what resolve he had, said quietly, "She didn't do anything wrong." The man backed off with a grumble. The dog wagged his tail, ignoring the tension. Isabela petted his fur slowly, drawing strength from the contact. Alexander wanted to take both of them far away, but an old wariness kept him frozen. It wasn't just pity. It was anger at a world where simple acts become threats. The square held its breath, waiting for the millionaire's next move. People expected harshness, but he stood motionless, torn by the knot between fear and the wish to trust. For a moment, Isabela looked into his eyes. There was no trick there, just a fear that felt both new and old. In all the city's noise, only that profound silence mattered. Alexander didn't know what to do, but as he looked at the barefoot girl with tired eyes, he felt the uncertainty of new beginnings. What if she just wanted to do good? After all, Alexander's car felt like something from another planet to Isabela. Leather seats, smelling brand new, a sparkling dash, everything spotless. She tries not to lean her wet body or muddy boots against anything. The dog in her lap trembles, muddy, with one paw still bleeding a little. Rain drums on the car body, as if it wants in. Alexander drives in silence, eyes locked on the road, hands steady on the wheel. In the rearview mirror, he watches Isabela and the little dog, wary and curious at once. Neither says a word. Isabela's nose is running. She sits as close to the door as she can, the scent of seat perfume mixing with the dog's wet fur. The fear that Alexander might kick her out grows with every stoplight. She hugs the dog tighter, whispering, "It'll be okay. Just hang on a little longer." Alexander presses his lips together. From a front seat, he can hear Isabela's faint voice, but he ignores it. He wonders why he let a clearly homeless girl into his car, and thinks, too, of everything his father always said about never trusting anyone. Even so, watching her shield the dog like that, he feels a new, strange pinch in his chest. The radio is off. Only the sound of rain and the dog's heavy breathing fill the car. Isabela's thin coat has already started soaking the seat, but she doesn't care. Her mind's only on the animal. At every turn, she shuts her eyes tight to keep from coughing, but she can't hold it back. A fit of dry cough escapes. Alexander glances in the mirror, and for a second his eyes soften. He doesn't ask her anything. On her side, Isabela tries to wipe her nose on her sleeve, but quickly gets her hands back around the dog's head. In a low, broken voice, she repeats, "Stay with me, please. Just a little longer. You're going to be okay." A block before the animal hospital, Alexander notices the fever in Isabela's face, the deep circles under her eyes, the voice barely above a whisper. He thinks to stop and ask if she's all right, but can't. He faces the childish fear of getting too drawn in. Instead, he drives faster. When they park, he waits for Isabela to get out first. She takes her time, afraid to let go of the dog, making sure she won't leave a single hair on the expensive seat. Alexandre notices. He sees it and tries, just this once, to feel what she feels, an overwhelming desire to save someone, even with no guarantee of being saved herself. The red chairs of the animal hospital were rigid, perfectly lined up, as cold as the hurried glances of people passing by. Isabela cradled the dog in her lap. He shivered, drenched from the rain and exhaustion, panting, wary of this bright, strange place. She herself felt her body trembling, not sure if it was from cold or fever. Alexander checked his phone every minute, restless. He hated hospitals, hated this sudden responsibility, and couldn't even explain why he'd listened to a girl off the street. But there he was, waiting for help, hands damp, feeling the odd sensation of caring again. The vet arrived first, brisk, calling their number in a serious tone. Isabela stood up unsteadily, the dog in her arms. Alexander followed, the hallway feeling longer with every step. The vet examined the dog, asked some quick questions, jotted notes, then noticed how pale Isabela was. "Are you feeling all right?" he asked, handing the dog a small treat. She tried to smile. The smile barely came. "Just a little cold, sir." Alexander noticed the sheen of sweat on her forehead, despite the chill. The doctor had her sit and went to fetch a thermometer. As they waited, she coughed, a dry and raspy sound. The dog glanced up at her, as if worried too. The thermometer read nearly 104. Alexander's chest went cold. The doctor suggested, "You should take her to the ER. This fever's not good, especially for a girl her age. The dog's hurt but stable. I'll look after him for you." Isabela hugged the dog tightly before letting go. Alexander took her hand, feeling the feverish warmth against his cold palm. For the first time in years, he let himself do something without explanation. He guided Isabela down the hall, following the nurse, not knowing if he was doing it for her, the dog, or for the part of himself who'd always wanted to care but never could. In the distance, the dog barked softly. Isabela looked back, big eyes full of fear and hope. Alexander said nothing. But at that moment, standing at the threshold, he silently promised to take care of them both, somehow. Alexander sat in the hospital waiting area, a hard plastic chair forcing his back upright. The AC kept him shivering, but it wasn't just the cold that made him uneasy. It was the weighty silence, broken by scattered coughing and the distant squeak of a gurney turning a corner. He kept his gaze low, staring at his own hands, nails clipped too short, fingers trembling almost invisibly. He couldn't get Isabela out of his mind. So small and curled up on the hospital bed, the dog nestled close to her legs. The heart-shaped necklace that caught the light on her neck reminded him, for a fleeting second, of the one his lost daughter wore so many years ago. Since then, the thought spun through his mind like a forbidden hope. Isabela's face, pale under the hospital's relentless fluorescent light, blended with his daughter's, their features tangled together, and remorse flooded in heavy, endless waves. Alexander had never trusted many, only those who could prove, on paper and in promises, they were worthy. And even then, he'd been betrayed more often than he'd care to remember. He'd learned disappointment early, ambitious relatives, a business partner who vanished with the work of a lifetime. Brick by brick, he built invisible walls, justifying every cold gesture to himself. But now, with a shaking girl and her frightened dog in his care, something inside him thawed. Something old, nearly forgotten. The hospital's sour scent, alcohol, disinfectant, the sweat of waiting, mixed with memories of another time, other smells, the warmth of a child's lap, laughter around a kitchen table. Shame stabbed through him. How many people had he pushed away, just out of fear of being hurt again? How many times had he chosen the brittle silence of loneliness rather than risk trusting? The dog shrank by his side, watchful eyes on every move. Alexander considered scooping Isabela up, sheltering her from her fear, shielding her, and perhaps himself, from the old, relentless guilt. For a moment, he wanted to say sorry to his daughter, as if Isabela might hear and understand. He took a shaky breath. He watched the tired faces around him, each wrestling their own ghosts. The clock marched on above the waiting room, and for the first time Alexander noticed that his old fear of trusting seemed small compared to the need to protect someone. He gently stroked the dog, glanced in the direction Isabela had been taken. Maybe, he thought, it was time to let himself feel again, even if it hurt, because, in the pain of waiting, he found he was still capable of hope. It was never loud in the hospital corridor, yet everything made noise. The hurried step of a nurse, the low whispers Isabela could never quite catch, but that stung just the same. Wind from outside bringing the scent of damp rain and gasoline. The harsh white lights above them, as cold as the words to come. Alexander was never attuned to such details, but now, he saw everything. He stood there, expensive coat wrinkled from having carried the weak dog in his arms, and suddenly it was as if he were a stranger, no longer the hospital owner, but just another lost man trying to do the right thing. The elevator doors dinged open, revealing 3 familiar faces, each of them clutching an overpriced umbrella and that businesslike look he knew so well. Worry laced with criticism. "Alexander, for God's sake, what do you think you're doing?" Aunt Helena was first, barely pausing for breath. She looked at Isabela, shrunk down, translucent, wet hair pasted to her forehead, as if she weren't even human, just a sad little shadow in the corner. Cousin Fabio whispered in his mother's ear, but Alexander caught it. How can he get mixed up with these people? He'll end up on the news, or worse. Alexander flinched, shame burning inside, but anger stirred too. The girl just dropped her eyes lower, clutching her aching belly. The dog, swollen snout and all, took a step toward her, half protecting, half apologizing. The staff peered from a safe distance, pretending to shuffle papers, really just waiting to see a scandal unfold. Alexander was famous, after all, but never for anything like this. He saw neighbors whisper, recognized that look of judgment, barely hidden contempt. "This girl is going to bring you trouble, Alexander. People are already talking." Uncle Jerson's voice was shrill, like fingernails on glass. They created a whole family chat just to gossip about it. "Have you forgotten everything we've been through?" Isabela didn't lift her head, utterly still, yet her chest rose and fell, quick and shallow. Her tiny, dirty hand trembled under the ragged sleeve. The courage she showed protecting the dog seemed drained by all those stares. But something had changed. Alexander felt it. He couldn't say how, but he didn't want to couldn't let her go. Normally, he would have stayed quiet, as always. But this time, silence hurt more than last night's storm. You don't know anything. Keep your voices down, please, Alexander said, startling even himself. She saved Max. She went hungry just so he could. Aunt Helena rolled her eyes, already glancing toward the exit, as if she hoped someone would rescue her. You really think she didn't do it on purpose? She's taking advantage of you, Alexander. People like that only know how to beg and steal. Have you forgotten what your father always said? Now Alexander's heart pounded differently. It wasn't guilt, wasn't fear. Something else was growing fast inside him. He looked at Isabela. All he saw was a child, quiet, trying to blend into the hospital walls so no one would notice she existed. The hospital blanket covered only half her thin body. A simple necklace swayed against her neck. Enough, Alexander said, quietly but firm, a muffled thunder. You want to talk about the past? Take a look at her. You're forgetting there's a sick child here, and she saved a dog. My dog. It's not going to be like before. Not with me. Fabio laughed, already pulling out his phone. You'll be a meme by morning. People are already asking if you've lost your mind. Tears filled Alexander's eyes, and he felt shame, but not for Isabela. For his own family, yes. For the life he'd led, always pretending not to see those in need. Isabela peeked up at him quickly, wary, as if never expecting any adult to stand up for her, ever. That look of, is he really talking about me, mixed with fear of what might happen later. When the others tried to keep arguing, Alexander raised his hand. For the first time, not to close a business deal, but to shield someone. You've said your piece. Now I'm going to take care of Isabela. If you want to help, bring blankets, food. Otherwise, leave. I have no more time for judgment. Not now. Not ever. Aunt Helena muttered an absurd under her breath. The rest left slowly, glancing back, promising with their eyes that they wouldn't forget this. Out in the hallway, everything fell even quieter. Even the tick-tock of the clock seemed to respect the moment. Alexander sat beside the bed, leaning in to speak softly so only she could hear. Nobody's going to take you away from here. I promise. Isabela said nothing, but she squeezed her eyes tight, and a single tear fell from her dirt-streaked eyelids. The dog hopped onto the bed and lay beside her. Let the whole world stare. Alexander didn't care anymore. In the white-lit corridor of the hospital, thin drizzle traced down the window. The air was heavy with the scent of alcohol and disinfectant. Isabela sat on a hard chair, hugging the dog, feet swinging, gaze fixed on the floor. Alexander, now in a hospital coat, leafed through paperwork, avoiding the girl's eyes. A nurse hustled past, bumping into Isabela's chair, but she barely flinched. She was used to being invisible. The dog, picking up on the tense mood, trembled slightly in her lap. The doctor entered with a look of concern. Isabela, I need to talk to you seriously, okay? Your dog's going to need to stay here a little while. He's sick, but we'll look after him, she explained, trying to sound gentle. Alexander kept silent. Isabela nodded, hugging the animal to her chest. The doctor crouched down to her level. Why are you alone, Isabela? Hasn't anyone come looking for you? The girl bit her lip, stared at the ground, and said nothing. She tried to change the subject with Alexander. Doctor, do you think I can go home after the test? The doctor finally met her gaze. For a second, he saw something familiar in that scared but stubborn look. He also noticed her worn necklace, with a faded heart pendant, exactly like the one he'd given his own daughter, lost so many years ago in the old apartment fire. The silence grew heavy. From down the hall came a baby's cries, a distant beep. Alexander asked the nurse, Please draw a blood sample. I need to be sure. His heart beat faster. He saw the necklace again, her bony hands, her wary but steady eyes. Could it be? Could this really be his missing daughter after all this time? Isabela stuck out her arm willingly for the blood draw. All she asked in a whisper, My dog will wait for me, right? They won't take him away from me. Alexander hesitated, his throat tight. No, he'll wait for you. And so will I promise. Outside, the rain picked up. Mixing with the tears, Isabela finally let fall in silence, clutching her necklace and feeling for the first time in so long, that maybe someone actually would wait for her. The hospital corridor was quiet, broken only by the crackle of the envelope in the doctor's hands. Alexander, suit and all in disarray, eyes deeply shadowed from lost sleep, could barely stand. On the bench, Isabela watched from the side, gripping the mutt that hadn't left her since that stormy night. It was just the two of them and fear, a familiar companion. The doctor stopped in front of him. The results are in. Alexander took the trembling envelope and, before opening it, looked at Isabela. She stared back, hard and steady, the look of someone who's waited too long. He read, reread, as if each word refused to settle into place. "It's really you?" he whispered, voice rough. The document in his hands confirmed it. Isabela, 9, was his missing daughter. Silence stretched heavier than stone. The dog licked Isabela's hand, and for the first time she looked up. Alexander dropped to his knees before her, no longer caring about his suit or pride, just the lost years. "Forgive me, sweetheart. I thought I'd never find you again." She didn't answer. Her eyes brimmed with tears, so long distrusting, desperate to believe broken promises. Still, it was her small, hesitant hand that reached out first, touching her father's face. With that timid gesture, the corridor breathed again. The doctor exhaled in relief and discreetly slipped away. Alexander, arms open, waited until Isabela, still hugging her dog, allowed herself to be drawn in. There, between the sterile hospital walls and the warmth of reunion, they wept together. It wasn't sadness. It was hope waking up at last, slow and beautiful after so long. Alexander stood transfixed by Isabela's bedside, breath ragged, his fists trembling. Thick tears still tracked down his face, and he could hardly keep her gaze. Isabela, bundled in hospital sheets, far too white for her street child's life, watched her father with a look split between silent shock, unexpected hope, and tentative relief. For a moment, they floated in a hush where only they existed. The dog, who'd kept a guarded watch until then, now wagged his tail furiously and nudged Isabela's hands. He felt the joy of their reunion in the scent of the moment, unconcerned with tears, content just to celebrate Isabela's shy smile, as rare as it was vital. Overwhelmed by emotion, Alexander finally crouched down beside the bed. His body shook, his mouth failed to find words. When they came, his voice was rough, hoarse with old sobs. "Forgive me, sweetheart. Forgive me, please, for everything." The girl hesitated but didn't flinch. She looked at him as if facing a mistake she wished she could fix, a hug she could never let herself forget. Her thin, dirty fingers gripped the sheets, and, without fully understanding, she edged hesitantly into his waiting arms. As Alexander gathered her up, both of them shook. It was an embrace full of fear, like they might slip away any second. In her father's arms, Isabela buried her face and sobbed. Alexander cried too, unashamed, feeling the weight of guilt dissolve at last in the warmth of their reunion. The dog jumped at their sides, licking Isabela's tear-stained cheeks and Alexander's trembling hands. Nurses watched from the doorway with silent, moved approval. A blessed quiet filled the room. It was the sound of bridges being rebuilt, slowly, even with fear. Holding his daughter, Alexander whispered, "This time will be different. I promise. You'll never be alone again." That hug held more than forgiveness. It carried the will to start anew, the courage to face everything else together. Isabela didn't answer, just hugged back tightly, face nestled in her father's shoulder. The dog made himself comfortable at their feet, guardian of the hope taking root there. And so, in that hospital room, time seemed to collapse into the simple warmth of their embrace. Outside, the machines and city noises carried on, but within father, daughter, and dog, a new story had already begun. Today, the house feels altogether different. Once, it was all echoing silence, furniture lost in long shadows, and that cold, clean scent of abandonment. Now, the laughter of a young girl bounces down the halls, shy at first, and then more and more free. The long-forgotten dog chases after her, barking loudly, tail wagging. He's family now. It was strange for Alexander at first. Used only to his routine, his curt sentences, and the weight of emptiness, he tripped over toys scattered in the living room, and, without realizing, smiled. Isabela, still wary, clung for days to an old teddy bear she'd brought from somewhere else, and took even longer to believe the warm bed was really hers. At their first breakfast together, she stared at the set table, the mug of milk, the bread with butter. She hesitated. Alexander sat beside her, pushed the plate closer, and instead of saying anything, just kept her company till she finished, letting time do the rest. The housekeeper, once stern and quiet, found herself chatting with Isabela about recipes and childhood smells. Suddenly, laughter mixed with the smell of cake filled the kitchen. In the hall, old family photos gained new attention. Sometimes, Isabela would stop and invent stories about the people in them. Some nights, Isabela would look out at the stars, hugging her teddy, and cry quietly. Alexander would pass by, stop on the other side of the door, not knowing what to do. He'd just go in, sit there beside her, saying nothing, until she drifted off again. No words were needed, but comfort was there. Over time, Isabela began to respond to being called, to meet people's eyes, to smile for photos taken at the park. The dog in her lap, hair tousled, Alexander by her side, shy but glowing. Small routines became shelter, breakfast bread, walks in the square, a bedtime story. Bit by bit, even the neighbors noticed. They started greeting Alexander with kindness, surprised by the changes in the house and in the man himself. Now, the emptiness is hard to imagine. On the wall, there's a new drawing made by Isabela, showing her, Alexander, and the dog, hand in hand. Anyone walking past the house hears the sounds of life, the kind of joyful noise you only find where hope has taken root. And the miracle, in the end, was this: a child welcomed home, a lost man found again, and a house, at last, turned into a home.